I took everything that's important for beginners to know in New World and simplified it down to 5 tips. They start off simple and get a little bit more in-depth as we go along, so be sure to stay for the entire video even if you know some of this stuff already. If you do find this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Alright, let's get into tip number 1. When starting an MMO, most people's first question is, what class should I play? But in New World, you should really not be asking yourself that. You should be asking yourself, how do I want to play? This is because when you make a character in New World, you don't pick a class. Instead, you pick a class through a series of decisions as you're playing. The first and most important decision that you're going to make is your weapon choice. If you want to be a tank, you'll run sword and shield. If you want to be a mage, you can run a fire staff or an ice gauntlet. Or if you want to heal, you can run the life staff. As you use your weapon of choice, you're going to gain XP and level it up, gaining points to spend to unlock new abilities and buffs. Depending on how you spend these points, it's really going to craft how you're going to play in New World. You get to equip 2 weapons at once, so say you want to play a paladin role. What you would want to do is run something like a sword and shield in one slot, and then run a life staff in the other. The sword and shield is going to provide tanky aspects, and the life staff is going to provide healing aspects. Because you're not locked into your choices, this system really opens up your ability to play exactly how you want. It also allows you to get really creative with your builds. As you level up, you're going to earn attribute points that you can put into different categories such as strength and intelligence. Depending on where you decide to put your points, it's going to buff certain weapons. If you notice next to the attribute name, there's a bunch of weapon icons. If you scroll over these weapons, it's going to tell you whether or not this is that weapon's main attribute. On top of this, when you hit certain point milestones, you're going to unlock different buffs. You can see which buffs you unlock by scrolling over these little circles on the progress bar. Your armor is going to come in and help you hit these milestones and also hone in your playstyle a little bit. The attributes that are on your armor and weapons are going to stack on top of the points that you spend and make you a lot more effective. Each item of armor also has a designated weight to it. Once you break certain thresholds of weight, your dodge is going to be significantly altered. Combine your weapon choice, your armor, and your attributes, and you can really create a playstyle of your own. Moving on to our next category, we have combat. Combat in New World is relatively straightforward. For offense, you can click for a quick light attack, or you can hold click for a heavy hitting attack. These basic attacks do not lock onto the target like they do in some other MMOs. This is going to make you have to aim a little bit to make sure your attacks land. If you really don't want to aim, I recommend sticking to melee weapons, although even with ranged weapons in this game, it really isn't that aim intensive like some FPSs would be. For defense, you can hold down right click to block attacks, or you can just dodge out of the way of them. Keep in mind when both blocking and dodging that you're going to be using stamina. If you fully run out of stamina, it's going to take 3 seconds to recharge, whereas if you just let it recharge on its own, it's only going to take 1 second. Because of this, you're going to want to really make sure that you don't run out of stamina. On top of these basics, you're also going to have abilities that can take a variety of different forms. You can do damage with an aimed ability or an AoE attack. You can cast crowd control abilities, slowing, stunning, or pushing enemies away, or you can heal yourself and teammates. When it comes to healing, many of the abilities are either area of effect or they have a lock-on targeting system where you can switch through your targets using your scroll wheel, or if you press control, you'll heal yourself. I recommend getting the hang of both your basic attacks and your abilities before you hop into PvP. Speaking of PvP, let's talk about factions. Picking a faction is essentially like picking the team that you're playing for. It works very similarly to Horde and Alliance in World of Warcraft. There are 3 factions which are designated by color. Marauders are green, Syndicate are purple, and Covenant are yellow. Each faction has its different lore behind it, so if you're into that stuff, you can dive right in, but if not, it doesn't really have much of a gameplay effect. To join a faction, all you have to do is follow the main quest line until it takes you to the main settlement in your area, and then once you're there, it's going to force you to join one of the 3 factions. Make sure you pick the same faction as your friends, or else you're going to be really limited with what you can do with them. As far as open world PvP goes, you're going to have to enable it while you're in a settlement. The stock binding for this is the U key. Once enabled, you can leave the settlement and fight other PvP-enabled players that are in the different factions. You gain experience and can get items from killing other players, but be careful that you don't get yourself ganked. Usually players travel in small groups if they're PvPing, so you want to be careful if you're going to enable PvP as a solo player. For another layer of PvP, your factions can fight over different territories. Whichever faction controls that territory gets benefits while inside of it, such as increased luck with drops and increased gathering speed. Outside of PvP, you can also quest for your faction. This is going to help you earn your faction's currency and buy specific items from your faction's recruiter. These items look different depending on which faction that you're in. If you decide that you don't like your faction, you can change it, but only once every 120 days. So picking a faction is a pretty big deal. Next up, we have professions. Professions work pretty similarly to your class's abilities. Basically, whatever you do most is what you're going to become the best at. You're not limited to the amount of professions you have, so you can really max them all out if you put enough time in, but it's going to take a lot of time. The professions are broken down into 3 categories: gathering, refining, and crafting. Each of these is going to represent a different stage of the process. Gathering is collecting raw materials and consists of logging, mining, fishing, harvesting, and skinning. Refining is the process of making these raw materials into usable materials and consists of smelting, woodworking, leatherworking, weaving, and stone cutting. The final step is crafting, which is basically turning your materials into usable items. These consist of weaponsmithing, armoring, engineering, jewel crafting, arcana, cooking, and furnishing. Gathering skills all require a specific tool to perform, so mining's going to need a pickaxe, fishing is going to need a fishing rod, and stuff like that. You can get better versions of each of these tools, which are going to help you gather faster and collect more resources. You can also add certain perks to the tools, which can do things like increasing their durability and making it more likely that rare materials are going to drop. Once you collect your materials, you can head back to your nearest settlement and refine them. Use these refined materials to craft into items that you can actually use. When you craft an item, you're going to gain XP towards that specific category. For instance, if you make a magical item, you're going to gain arcana experience, or if you make armor, you're going to gain armoring experience. Depending on what you want to make, it requires accessing a different crafting station in a settlement. While crafting, you can add special items to add perks to that item, and also add Azoth to increase the chance of making a better item. The higher you level up your crafting, the better items you can make, but be aware if you're not harvesting your own resources, this can get really costly really quick. So, how do you go about making money in New World? You get coins from questing, but you probably already assumed that. What do you do with all the items you collect? There are no vendors, so selling them to NPCs is off the table. If you have an item you want to get rid of, you can salvage it. You do this through your inventory or storage unit to receive a small amount of gold and repair parts. Where you're going to make all the real gold is in the trading center. This is essentially the auction house. You can buy and sell items to and from other players here. What you want to keep in mind when you're selling items is what makes them valuable. For instance, raw materials are often more valuable than refined materials because players can use them to increase their refining skills. If you're trying to sell weapons or armor, try to keep in mind the playstyle that they fit into. For instance, if you're selling a life staff, it relies primarily on focus. What this means is a life staff that gives you more focus is going to sell for more than a life staff that gives you more strength or something else. So you're going to want to keep stuff like this in mind when you're deciding whether to salvage or sell. If you want to check the price that things are going for, you can throw them in the trading center. When you go to sell them, it's going to automatically compare it to others selling the same item. Keep in mind that trade centers aren't connected through settlements, so you're only going to see the items in your settlement. If you go up to the top right of the trade center, you can change this. A good strategy is to look up the items in nearby settlements and see where they're selling for the most at. Sometimes traveling to another settlement to sell them is going to earn you a lot more money. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more New World content. My name is Marcus, aka Apostle. Thanks for watching.